Okay. All right. Welcome everybody who's on the call, and that's a small but proud group. And welcome to you, Mark Glatt, our trainer of Ardente, who's talking to us from his office at Santa Anita this morning. Before we get into it, just to discuss Ardente and anything else that comes up on the agenda, I wanted to give people just a little bit of a primer on our trainer's background and history, which is pretty darn good, pretty impressive. Mark is a Hall of Famer. Uh, He's in the Washington Racing Hall of Fame. He's from that part of the world originally. He is perennially a leader in the Southern California circuit since he's moved his operation down there, including as recently as last spring, he won the Santa Anita Spring Meet. And he's, as I said, perennially a guy that you have to contend with if you're going to try to win a training title in Southern California. He's also the trainer of a number of top horses that are household names, stallions, some of them, great mares, others after they were in Mark's care. Dr. Schivel probably comes to mind at the top of the list. He was the winner of the Grade 1 Bing Crosby. He was a runner-up in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Dr. Venkman, another Breeders' Cup horse for Mark, hit the board as well too. Mark, have I left out maybe your favorite stakes horse, your favorite horse of all time in that small group that I just mentioned?
I think Dr. Venkman is, he's my pal. He's a very nice horse. I bought him as a yearling, and so I have a pretty soft heart for him. But but there's a number of them that become a bit attached to, over the years. But most recently, I would probably say him.
Boy, he's good. He was good in the sprint distances, and then he routed well. He routes well as well too. You have to love a horse like that.
Yeah, he's very versatile. He's very consistent. You can count on him showing up just about every time he's ran in all of his career starts. I don't think he's been worse than fourth out of 11 or 12 starts now. So he's won, or he's ran very well. He ran very well at Churchill. He ran very well at Keeneland, Del Mar, Santa Anita. He's just as consistent as can be, and a cool horse to be around.
Mark, I know you to be a really hands-on guy, to be a trainer that really likes to see, every nuance of your horses. I mean, some guys are more chessboard back in the office, but I know you like to watch your horses train. You got that special spot right there near Clocker's Corner at Santa Anita that almost anybody who's trying to find you, that's where they'll find you almost every single morning. Do you have a philosophy towards your training that goes beyond what I just mentioned that you think is, sort of the core of how you approach developing racehorses?
Uh, I do. I train instinctively, and I train based upon what the horse, each individual tells me on kind of a daily basis. I believe that every horse needs to be trained a little bit differently based upon, a number of different factors. And, when I say instinctively, it's kind of hard to put into words, but they're no different than us. They have their good days and their bad days and how they're feeling a lot of them, and I try and take what they kind of portray to me and map out a little bit of a training schedule based on how I think they're doing on a daily basis or nearly a daily basis. And I came up through um, a lot of cheaper horses, and those horses can be a bit more challenging, I think. And so my dad trained very instinctively, and I took that from him. And even though my group of horses, the quality has improved tremendously over the last few years. I don't I don't really train any differently than if they were a lower level type of horse.
You were instrumental in helping us select Ardente. I know we kind of met and talked about how much, your group that had been looking at this horse and how our group also liked this horse at the April sale. If you had to sum up, how do you approach the sales? What are you looking for? What type of racehorse are you looking for other than a fast one?
Um, you have such a short time to evaluate these horses at the sales, but you try and get a an idea of what they might be like mentally. And so you really you need the athlete. I am looking for the athlete. Certainly their pedigree means something. But in the 2-year-old sales, I think you're there, unless you have a budget that's, unlimited. I think you have to give up a little bit of pedigree for the athlete in order to fall into most budgets. And then try and get an idea of what they may be like mentally. And once you zero in on certain horses, I like to go back and try and see them on 2 or 3 different occasions. I don't want any of the consigners to know that I'm too interested in their horses. Just to kind of, you don't want everybody knowing what your business is. But obviously, the more times that you visit them, the more that they keep track of all of those kinds of things. And you don't want to let your whole card out. So you try and do it a little bit.
Stealth?
On the QT if you can. I'll even kind of walk by their stalls, not actually request to see them out. I'll just kind of walk by and see what their mannerisms are in the stall, and things like that when people aren't necessarily around.
I'm going to take that under advisement, Mark. You're very sneaky, but good sneaky. And I think that's a great idea. I'm imagining that that's how you help to learn a bit more about their temperament and maybe their class level by seeing how they behave throughout the day and through multiple visits. Is that true?
Yes, yes, I think so. Again, it's hard to make a real great evaluation of a horse in such a short period of time that we have there, but you can get at least a gut feeling about a horse, and if that gut feeling's not there, then you probably ought to move on to the next one.
Well, we all had a good gut feeling about Ardente, and I do sense that she is mentally still, a horse that has promise along those lines. Tell us where we're at with her, because I know we've had some fits and starts, one sort of air issue down there at San Luis Rey, and then just a recent issue a couple of weeks back that has kind of changed your philosophy about what you're doing with her, in the short term.
Well, we gave her a break right out of the sale, as everyone knows, and then about midsummer or so, we put her back into training, and she really has been lights out from day one. When we started back with her, she was really aggressive, but kind of channeled that aggressiveness in the right way. And then one morning, I don't know if I can remember the exact timetable. I want to say it was back maybe 3 or 4 works. On the gallop out, we heard her making a bit of noise. Um, Sculptor, she scoped clean. Um, I think it was safe to assume at that point that maybe she displaced her soft palate that day, and proceeded to add some equipment to her, that kind of helps from them, to keep them from displacing. And we did. She seemed to accept it well. And not all horses will, especially young fillies. They don't want too much in their mouths or in their on their heads oftentimes. And so, if they fight it, it starts working against you. But she seemed to accept it. But we did notice after we added that equipment that her works weren't nearly as sharp as they were prior to adding that equipment. Uh, I should add, we do believe this filly is a turf filly. Um, everything about her just kind of suggests turf. And I don't think that's a big surprise given her pedigree and everything. But that was kind of about the same time frame where we were seeing a little bit of regression in her works once we put that equipment on, that we were starting to ramp it up pretty good with distance and asking her a little bit more. And these true turf horses, when you do start working further and asking them for more in those workouts on dirt, they will kind of fall apart. So, we weren't quite sure what was going on with her, and I'm saying a slight regression. This wasn't anything that, but it was different than her earlier works. So I had to think about, well, what's causing this? Is it because we're going further on the dirt? Is it because, potentially the equipment? So once we saw a couple, two or three workouts like that from her, we decided to take all that equipment off of her. And all the added equipment. And that's typically a figure eight and a tongue tie are the two equipment changes you make on those horses. And once we took that off, she kind of got back to working like she was prior to the equipment being added. So we thought, okay, we only heard the potential displacement one time. Maybe she doesn't really need it. And so we were real enthused by, I think it was two workouts back. And then we came back, um, and she didn't work very well in her last workout. And, which didn't really make sense based upon the week before. Uh, we did we did scope her after that workout, and we found a fair amount of blood. And she did work on some Lasix that morning. So we really have had to then, which is not unusual. Um, I don't think this is going to be a habitual problem for her. That's my gut feeling at the moment. A lot of times horses will bleed on a one-off occasion, and then it's not a major issue there, moving forward. But what we did do is since that workout, and the recent weather kind of played in with it, we just backed off on her some. And part of it was because that was necessary after having a bleeding episode, and a part of it was, here over the last week or so, at least it's been because of weather.
Yep.
And when we get this kind of weather where it's storm after storm for consecutive days, we are all but shut down. The rules in place now, we just really can't do much. We can keep them moving a little bit, but we're sure not gonna. So she's had a little bit more of a backing off of because of the weather than I first anticipated, but you want to let those lungs heal up. At the moment, I'm going to assume that bleeding episode, she could have been carrying a little low grade virus where, uh, oftentimes they are when they kind of bleed uncharacteristically. Um, they're not sick, they're not acting sick, they don't have a temperature, but they got something, so they don't really show you that they're just a tad off. But they are, and that can create, a bleeding episode on a given day. That being said, we're close enough to the first of the year with her schedule. And if everyone doesn't know, 2-year-olds are not allowed to run on Lasix, but 3-year-olds are, at least in non-stakes events. So I've kind of remapped her schedule now to once this weather clears up out of here, she will be coming to Santa Anita here probably over the next couple, 2 or 3 days. That was supposed to be last week, but that got kind of delayed with all of this weather because there was no real need to move her up here any sooner, knowing that we were going to have a lot of track closures and such. So I've kind of remapped her schedule. The Santa Anita condition book should probably be out the first week of December. And we're going to be looking for a maiden 3-year-old filly turf race shortly, hopefully after the first of the year. I'm going to do what I can with the racing secretary to make sure that that race isn't on December 30th, and that it's at least January 1 so that, she can run on Lasix. And she very well may not need it, and this may not very well be a problem, but if we're close enough, why risk running her without Lasix? And between now and then, she's going to work herself back up to a couple of more works here very soon, and we'll monitor to see if this bleeding situation, as I said, was a one-off, or if she is going to kind of go the wrong direction with it. Like I said, I don't think my gut feeling is it won't be it might be a problem at some point in her career. I don't expect it to be a problem in the short term. And until she proves me otherwise. So as long as once we get back to actually some workouts here and things, I think she'll get right back on schedule, and hopefully we don't see any blood on the end of an endoscopic exam after some of these workouts that she'll have, and we'll take our best shot with her when she does run, hopefully right after the first of the year.
Mark, that's a great summary, and thank you for going into such great detail because I think it really illustrates how how you approach the ups and downs of training and how you try to, as you said, sort of measure what you're doing with each horse individually. So I love the fact that you went into such great detail. I'll ask the obvious question. What do you think of her ability? I know we've had some ups and downs, but what do you think of her talent level?
Well, as I've said, I think she's a turf horse, and so I'm assuming there's going to be, even more when she runs on the grass. Uh, we can't evaluate her on a grass workout. It'd be nice if we could. So, you know, the best thing I can say about her right now is when she's right, when she doesn't have, you know, blood after a workout. The whole equipment thing, I explained that. She's very aggressive and she seems to be very genuine. So I think she's going to at least be a hard trying filly that gives you, really good effort. We were before we kind of stopped, kind of had a interruption in her schedule here. We were kind of getting to that point where we hadn't quite gotten there where we would be able to really put some works into her to further evaluate her. So I think the answer to that question is I'm pretty certain she's going to be a hard trying filly, a filly that's going to give you everything she has. But how much talent she has, I think, remains to be seen, and we may not really know that ability level until we actually see her on the grass.
Of course. I think you can gauge a little, or some guys can gauge a little with the synthetic track as a proxy, but even that is, still a bit of a crapshoot. So, Mark, I really appreciate you going through all of this. We've got some partners on the line right now. If any of you want to unmute yourself and ask a question of Mark before we wrap things up, uh, the world's your oyster. Go ahead. So I know we've got Jeff Levinson and Stan Gorman and Paul Farr and Dan Rivers. If any of you have a question for him, go for it.
Well,
Paul,
maybe
you unmuted
because
yourself. Go.
maybe because it was in the press today, obviously, when the Bob Hope didn't go again, not specific to Ardente, but just as it relates to racing in California and what's your kind of view of, I mean, I know it's a tough 2-year-old dirt colt thing, but beyond that even, you have an opinion?
I'm not sure I totally understand your question.
Just on racing in California, I guess more broadly, when they
Well, I
have
don't, it's an interesting question. I think that, as you get to know me, I'm pretty honest and I'm pretty forthright. We're struggling. I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about it. How to fix it, we could talk all day long about that, but certainly, we're down to one racetrack in California, or one circuit, I should say. And I don't think that's ever good for the overall health of racing. Although it was probably necessary to contract in order to make things in the South, better for the time being. But but it's the dirty little secret that everyone knows. Without subsidized purses, uh, it's it's very difficult to compete with the likes of Oaklawn Park and Kentucky and even New York to some extent, because it's expensive, and
Right.
California is a very expensive place. And, when you're competing against other racetracks that give away, significantly more money, and then you do have the Bob Baffert factor out here on the dirt. How many people want to go run for less money on the dirt and have to face him on a
Right.
regular basis with two or three of them? So, and if you're not bringing new young horses, to the circuit on a yearly basis, and a number of them, um, it just continues to kind of the horse population dwindles down. So
Right.
I think we're in serious trouble long term. I know that, they are able to they're going to be offering a $70,000 maiden special weight race at the upcoming meet at Santa Anita, which is going to be 5,000 more than it was a year ago at the
Right.
classic meet.
Hmm.
Um, you know, a lot of our grade threes are the bare minimum, $100,000 purse. So, um, that's the negative part of things. I do think there are some things in the works. They are working on trying to get the instant racing machines here in California. It's going to be a very big challenge, but not impossible. So we're hopeful that something like that would happen because those are what have made the purse structures in both Arkansas and Kentucky what they are exactly
Right.
those machines. So
Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath because the state of California is very difficult for anything like that to potentially happen, but not impossible. And that's all the bad news about California racing. The good news is we we basically have year-round turf racing, and so that's a good thing because most jurisdictions don't,
Right.
due to weather. Um, and you know, shorter fields, always make racing a little bit easier. Even if the quality, which I think the quality is still very strong in California, uh, but shorter fields do make it typically easier to win races. We all want larger fields, but while they're still on the shorter side of things, it does make things a little bit easier, even if you're facing quality horses. There's a lot of difference for a young horse to start in a 6 or 7 horse field than say a 12 horse field because most of those maiden
Right.
races are big fields because of the purse money.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll see. Like I said, I think there is a dim light at the end of the tunnel that um, that we can get some subsidy here because it's the only way. It's really the only answer,
Yeah.
and I think that goes for any track anywhere.
Yeah. Totally.
Because like I said, the expenses keep going up, but the price of horses now, my goodness, it's I'm sure you followed the sales here. Your dollar doesn't go nearly as far as it used to, in just acquiring these horses. So
Well, and it's in the same way that certain tracks and states are getting the lion's share. It's not, I'm a breeder and I race, and breeding's as dodgy as racing is. And the prices at the very top are up, and maybe the upper middle are up, but everything else, the middle down, is terrible. I mean, you're basically giving them away for what you pay for any reasonable stallion fee and to raise them and the vets and the boarding and the prep and the it's just gotten ridiculous.
Yeah, it has. I don't disagree with you. Although I do think the top end has grown um, for whatever reason, but yeah, I mean it's feast or famine, from a breeder standpoint. It's very, very difficult. I because I'm a buyer, not much of a seller. I moan and groan about the price of these horses, but especially nowadays, but at the same time, I understand for every score that a breeder is making on an expensive yearling, then they have four, five, or six maybe in that same year that didn't bring peanuts, and so I
Right.
don't really begrudge people that do make a score, although my job is to buy them as inexpensively as I possibly can.
Well, we
Right.
feel awful, Mark, personally at U Racing Stable that we only gave 85,000 for Rivera and we beat Baffert twice, including a stakes race. We are not doing our job at U Racing Stable in that regard. We are just not following the trend here. No, I appreciate that, Mark. And Paul, you heard it. Mark is a very direct, he's a straight shooter. There's some
Yeah, I
challenges,
appreciate
certainly.
that. Yeah.
Uh, Anybody else have a question for Mark before we wrap things up?
Hey, Mark, in the short term, do you anticipate a lot more shipping activity from your stable with the purses at Kentucky Downs, as an example?
You know, it's a great question. Um, because I am kind of so hands-on, um, I have thought, you know, on a number of occasions about putting a stable in Kentucky, but I don't think I'm built to be stretched into two different places that are 3,000 miles apart from one another. So I am considering a move to Kentucky, strongly considering it. My background is I have three kids with my wife, and they're all in their early 20s. They're not out of the house yet, so they're still fairly dependent upon us, but uh, maybe not for a whole lot longer, or maybe for a lot longer. I don't know. We'll see. But to answer your question, I think for a short period of time, I would put some horses in Kentucky. I'm not, but I'm not really, like I said, built to have two different operations. Wondering what's going on in Kentucky if I'm in California and vice versa. Um, I like to be here most every day. Most vacations are if I go to a horse sale. So, and you know, shipping in for a race, I mean, I've done that here and there, but you're really, most of the time putting yourself at a pretty big disadvantage, particularly in the summertime. If you take a horse from Delmar to run at Kentucky Downs with the humidity and the things that bring the weather bring at that time of year, you better be bringing much the best. Um, and because a lot of horses aren't going to overcome that. So I think you kind of gotta be there to in order to have your best chance, and really anywhere you race.
That's a good summary, Mark. Dan, thank you for the question. Yeah, Kentucky Downs is pretty enticing, but there come risks too with shipping, et cetera. Anybody else before we wrap things up with Mark? All right, Mark Glatt, you have proven once again to be a cerebral and much more loquacious than meets the eye with you. Most people when they meet you, like, oh boy, Mark's intimidating. He doesn't say much. No, Mark says plenty. You just have to ask him. So we really appreciate your time, the extension of your time today, Mark, and we really appreciate your going into such great detail and with such care. Into Ardente's future. We're looking forward to getting her to the races on her time and your time. And just wanted to say thanks again for finding some time for us today.
No problem, anytime, and good to talk to everyone.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. Have a great
Thanks,
rest of the
Mark.
day. This will be recorded, so we'll try to get this with our technological skill onto YouTube and out to everybody within the next several hours, certainly within the next day. Thanks so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Bye bye.